I'd never seen a grown woman lose her mind like that, screaming, swinging a sledgehammer, and tearing down my fence in front of half the neighborhood until that morning when Deborah Wilson finally snapped. She was still in her pajamas, hair wild, shouting nonsense while the cops put her in handcuffs. And the craziest part, her own husband came over later. To thank me. Yeah, that's how this whole thing ended. But to really understand how it got that far, you have to start at the beginning, back when I thought moving into Meadow Creek Estates was going to be the best decision of my life. I'd just bought my first home, a modest 3-bedroom with a big backyard. I was proud of it. It was perfect for me and my 7-year-old daughter, Emma. I'm a real estate attorney, so the idea of a well-regulated neighborhood sounded safe, predictable. The real estate agent called it a tight-knit community with great amenities. What he forgot to mention was the dictatorship disguised as a homeowners association and its self-appointed queen, Deborah Wilson. Everyone warned me about her. Mr. Anderson, the sweet old man next door, said it first. "She thinks this whole neighborhood belongs to her," he whispered while helping me unpack. "Just don't cross her." The Martinez family brought me a welcome basket and added, "She fined us for putting up a swing set." And Amanda, a kind teacher from down the street, said, "Just hide your trash cans exactly according to Section 3.4. Everyone smiled politely, but spoke with that same weary fear like survivors of the same war. At first, I thought they were exaggerating, until I noticed people cutting straight through my backyard towels over their shoulders, kids dragging pool floats like my property was a public sidewalk. Apparently, there was a path people used to reach the community pool, and that path just happened to run through my lawn. I'm a lawyer. The moment I saw it, alarm bells went off. Liability trespassing lawsuits, it was a nightmare waiting to happen. So I checked my deed property survey HOA rules. No easement, no access rights. That path wasn't official, it was just habit. That's when Deborah showed up at my door. Mid-40s tennis whites, perfect ponytail so tight it looked painful. "I'm Deborah Wilson, HOA Vice President," she announced as if I should bow. "That pathway behind your house has been the community access to the pool for 15 years. I smiled politely. "I'll look into it." Her expression didn't change. "We value our traditions here, Mr. Foster." She said traditions like it was a threat. I did look into it. Everything about my property was clear and legal. So I hired a fencing company, got all the required approvals, and built a 6-foot privacy fence perfectly compliant with HOA codes. Emma loved it. "Now, strangers can't walk through our yard," she said, drawing a picture of our house with the new fence. I pinned it to the fridge. I had no idea it was about to become a symbol of war. The morning after the fence was finished, I was sipping my first coffee when Deborah stormed up my driveway, red-faced and trembling. "This is unacceptable," she shrieked, waving her phone to record video. "You've disrupted the community aesthetic and blocked an essential pathway." Still in my bathrobe, I calmly opened the folder I'd prepared: approvals permits, color swatches. "The fence meets every regulation," I said, "and there's no easement. The path isn't public." Her jaw locked. "This isn't about law, it's about tradition." That's when I noticed her husband, Thomas, standing across the street, frozen with his car keys in hand. He looked embarrassed. When our eyes met, he gave a small, silent nod like he was saying, "Brace yourself." The next evening, Deborah called an emergency HOA meeting. She made a full presentation about how my fence was destroying property values. Charts, PowerPoints. Dramatic pauses, the whole show. When it was my turn, I simply read the bylaws back to her section by section. I presented photos of 3 other fences exactly like mine that she'd approved for her friends. The vote wasn't even close. The fence stayed. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. The next morning at 6 a.m., flashing red and blue lights reflected through my window. A police officer stood on my porch. "We received a noise complaint," he said awkwardly. The neighborhood was silent except for birds. He checked, apologized, and left. I looked across the street. There she was, Deborah, standing in her robe, sipping coffee, smiling like she'd just won. From that day, the harassment never stopped. Her SUV always accidentally blocked my driveway. Violation notices started showing up in my mailbox, trash cans, lawn height, unauthorized flowers. Neighbors stopped talking to me. Then came the rumors claims that I'd been disbarred, that I was suing the HOA. Completely made-up nonsense. My clients even started asking questions. I tried to brush it off, but it wore me down. Every morning, I woke up dreading what would come next. Every evening, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by violation letters and fake accusations, feeling like I was losing my mind. One night, I called my mother, a retired judge, and told her I was ready to sell the house. I followed every rule I said. Why is she doing this? Her answer hit me like a hammer. She's not fighting about a fence, Benjamin. She's fighting for control. For a moment, I actually wondered if I was the problem. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I should have just let people use that path. But then I looked at Emma's drawing on the fridge, our home, our fence, her smiling stick figure, and I remembered why I'd built it. Boundaries matter, especially when bullies are involved. That's when Thomas knocked on my door, late at night. He looked exhausted, eyes hollow. "We can't talk here," he said quietly. "Meet me at the coffee shop tomorrow." At the cafe, he told me everything. Deborah had been fired years ago for aggressive management. Running the HOA gave her power again. She'd built a backyard shed, unauthorized, unpermitted, where she stored files on every resident she'd punished. "She calls it her compliance archive," he said, disgusted. "She edits, meeting minutes changes, votes, deletes objections." "I've watched her do it for years." He looked up at me, almost pleading. "She's afraid of being exposed. That's her real weakness." I walked out of that cafe with one thought: game on. I installed security cameras all around my property, perfectly legal, clearly marked. Within days, they caught Deborah moving my trash cans at night, spraying something on my flower beds, even sneaking onto my lawn in a hoodie. I gathered everything, and I wasn't alone. Mr. Anderson admitted she'd threatened him years ago. The Martinez family showed me fines for a swing set identical to one Deborah's friend had. Amanda, the HOA secretary, confessed that Deborah forced her to alter official minutes. We started meeting quietly. Driveways, grocery aisles, whispered conversations. I called us the Resistance. Together, we documented every case of selective enforcement, proof that Deborah punished enemies and protected friends. When I posted a legal flyer on the community board titled, "Know Your Rights as a Homeowner," she tore it down overnight. I replaced it the next morning with a note. Copies distributed to all residents. It drove her insane. Then Amanda told me something big. Deborah planned to push through a property lien against my house illegally to collect unpaid fines. That's when I made my move. I filed my candidacy for HOA president. When Deborah found out, she cornered me at the mailboxes. "You think anyone will vote for you?" she sneered. "I am this neighborhood." I smiled. "Then you won't mind a fair election." The room was packed the night of the annual meeting. Deborah came in with her lawyer and 2 real estate experts ready for a show. She started strong, talked about how she'd protected property values and made tough choices for the community. She actually got applause from a few of her loyalists. Then it was my turn. I plugged in my laptop and projected 2 columns of photos on the left: fences, sheds, swing sets that had been fined. On the right, identical ones that hadn't. The only difference was who owned them. Murmurs spread across the room. I showed documents proving Deborah's shed was illegal. Too tall, unapproved, never permitted. Then I displayed Amanda's handwritten meeting notes beside the official ones Deborah filed: names, deleted, votes, changed. The silence was electric. Deborah jumped up, face red. "This is a personal attack," she screamed. "He's manipulating evidence." Then Thomas stood up from the back row. "He's telling the truth," he said. I helped him gather it. You could have heard a pin drop. People started standing, Mrs. Martinez first. "You fined us $3,000 for our kid's swing set," she said, voice shaking. "We had to take out a loan." Then Mr. Anderson, then more story after story of petty punishments, threats, and lies. Deborah's empire collapsed right there. Her lawyer quietly packed up. The crowd turned. Someone shouted, "Vote, now," and they did. I won in a landslide. Deborah stormed out before the final count, slamming the door so hard it echoed. I thought that was the end. But the next morning at 6:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. Mr. Anderson was on my porch out of breath. "You'd better come see this," he said. Behind my house, Deborah was out there with a sledgehammer smashing my fence apart, screaming about ruining her community. Splinters flew. Neighbors filmed from their lawns, and Thomas just stood there watching, pale and silent. I called the police and waited. "Deborah," I shouted, keeping my distance. "You're committing a crime. Stop now." She turned eyes wild. "You destroyed everything, 15 years of order, and you ruined it." Then she swung again. By the time the cops arrived, she'd knocked down 8 feet of fence. They arrested her on the spot. She dropped the hammer, shaking, realizing it was over. The video spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The HOA tyrant brought down by her own rage. She was charged with property destruction and trespassing. I sued for damages and won. She sold her house, divorced Thomas, and disappeared to some town without an HOA. The next HOA meeting, I stood at the same podium she once ruled from and declared, "All pending fines are suspended. We're rebuilding this community, not policing it." That was the moment Meadow Creek Estates finally exhaled. And me, I just looked at that repaired fence and thought about everything it had cost and everything it had protected. Because sometimes, the only way to stop a bully is to build a wall they can't climb.